Along the Cape Fear River in North Carolina, there is a serious issue that affects many local residents: water pollution. More specifically, water pollution from per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS. Since the 1950s, PFAS have been used in the U.S. in many things ranging from firefighting foam to fireproof coating on furniture. These and other PFAS-coated products are produced in some factories that have been recently accused of dumping their PFAS-contaminated waste into public water supplies. In fact, as found in one study in October of 2020 in the Environmental Science and Technology Letters by Andrew and Nydenko, over 200 million people in the United States likely receive water containing some amount of PFAS. Recently, in 2016, a study was published in the journal Environmental Science and Technology by Sun, Arevalo, Striner, and 6 other contributors. The study claimed that a plant in Fayetteville, North Carolina, operated by Chemours, which happens to be a spinoff of DuPont, was releasing toxic chemicals into the Cape Fear River. One of these chemicals, hexafluoropropylene oxide dimer acid, a type of PFAS known as Gen X, gained considerable public attention. It was discovered that the company had been dumping it and other chemicals into the river since the 1980s. Though there was no proof that this chemical caused any risks to human health, residents along the Cape Fear River were deeply concerned. A lack of knowledge or familiarity with PFAS, as well as the absence of personal control over the situation, created a panic among many locals. The likelihood of developing any health issues from these chemicals is very rare, but the possibility has set many on edge. Though no direct link has been proven between the presence of PFAS chemicals and human health issues, many studies have suggested a correlation. One study from June of 2020 by Foguth, Sepulveda, and Cannon, found in the Toxic Journal, concluded that these chemicals likely negatively affect dopamine neurotransmission, gene expression, which is important for neurodevelopment, motor function, stress, and creates neurological effects which could potentially increase the risk of psychiatric disorders. In addition, the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, website states, studies indicate that PFOA and PFOS, both types of PFAS, can cause reproductive and developmental liver and kidney and immunological effects in laboratory animals. Both chemicals have caused tumors in animals. The most consistent findings are increased cholesterol levels among exposed populations, with more limited findings related to low infant birth rate weights, effects on the immune system, cancer, and thyroid hormone disruption. This indicates the severity of the possible health effects of consuming the contaminated water. PFAS chemicals, rather than break down in the human body, stay and accumulate for long periods of time. They have even been found in newly born babies. As stated in Foguth, Sepulveda, and Cannon's study, PFAS have been quantified in breast milk, amniotic fluid, and fetal tissue, including the liver, lung, heart, and brain, umbilical cord, and placenta, indicating that infants are being exposed from the very beginning of life. Though these facts have created significant public outcry and desire for change, what is truly being done to address this issue? The EPA is still attempting to assess all risks associated with PFAS water pollution. As of today, they have completed some regulatory actions and are working on many more. For example, on January 19, 2021, the EPA released a document about their significant new use rule from July of 2020, which bans companies from using certain PFAS while manufacturing, importing, or processing without earlier evaluation and consent from the EPA. The organization also created the health advisory level of 70 parts per trillion. For reference, according to the Cape Fear Public Utility Authority, the total PFAS concentration in Wilmington was 406 parts per trillion. Unfortunately, the EPA is underfunded with too many tasks and too little resources to focus on a significant amount of time on studying PFAS. The organization did recently re-propose the 5th Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule to collect new data on PFAS in drinking water. The proposed rule would provide new data that is critically needed to improve EPA's understanding of the frequency that 29 PFAS are found in the nation's drinking water systems and at what levels. This would hopefully improve testing locally and allow for the EPA to collect enough data for sufficient regulations. Here is one depiction of the required length of time that the EPA must take to approve regulations. There are several steps, with the last being a 6-year review. One reason for the absence of considerable regulations is the lack of cooperation between the local, state, and federal government. Each level of government has attempted to create their own solutions, but have not been able to effectively coordinate. The North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, or NCDEQ, has the ability to cite cities for violating pollution limits, but has yet to do so in regards to the PFAS pollution. According to a WECT News article in March of 2021, the North Carolina DEQ did recently fine Chemours $200,000 for not keeping the so-called forever chemicals out of the public water supply. Also, in 2017, the North Carolina DEQ issued a consent order that forced Chemours to discontinue its release of PFAS into public waters. The North Carolina governor has also formally asked the EPA to set limits for Gen X and other similar pollutants, but no real regulations have come from this. Many have suggested solutions that could reduce or eliminate Gen X and other PFAS from the Cape Fear River. North Carolina Representative Pricey Harrison from Greensboro believes that the first step in dealing with the PFAS issue is to set maximum contaminant levels for North Carolina's PFAS. She feels that the federal government should regulate PFAS as a single class rather than setting an MCL, or maximum contaminant level, for specific types of PFAS. The MCL would regulate the entire spectrum, as reported by North Carolina Health News. This form of regulation is considered command and control, or as Rosenbaum put it in his 2020 book, Environmental Politics and Policy, the standards and enforcement approach to environmental issues. Unfortunately, this proposal will be very difficult to enact as the federal government has so many checks and balances. Additionally, many elected representatives have chosen to focus their attention on other matters, especially since no direct connection between human health risks and PFAS contamination have been proven. Many have reasonably diverted their attention to dealing with the current pandemic that is raging in the United States as well as the rest of the world. Another possible solution suggested by Melanie Benesch, legislative attorney for the Environmental Working Group, is, as stated by the News Observer, states should not wait for the EPA to act. It will be years, if ever, before a final drinking water standard is set. States should continue to set their own standards to protect Americans from toxic PFAS. End quote. If a state were to issue statewide limits on PFAS, then this would be a form of command and control regulation as well. Sadly, this would also be difficult to enact as the state government is very divided or partisan. What's more, North Carolina's government is currently diverting its attention to handling the pandemic and administering vaccines to the population. Lastly, some believe that creating water treatment plants in counties along the Cape Fear River is the next best step. However, these are costly and would end up releasing their PFAS-contaminated water back into the river, causing those downstream from them increased levels of PFAS. In conclusion, PFAS chemicals released into the Cape Fear River by the Chemours plant are present in the public water supply of those downstream from the facility. There have been many studies associating these toxins to a number of serious human health risks, but regulating PFAS is difficult because of the lack of conclusive proof. Moreover, attempts are being made to punish those responsible for dumping these chemicals into the river, but little progress has been made as to removing PFAS from the water. Solutions have been proposed, but with the current state of the United States' divided political atmosphere and focus on the coronavirus pandemic, it is likely that these solutions will not come to fruition anytime soon, if at all.